Aliens think humans have failed. We launched a spaceship with a simple butter recipe. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Join me in launching a spaceship with a can of butter by clicking the like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to follow the story. And now I'm going to launch you into the compressor, hissed like an angry cat, steam curling up Nolan Reed's forearm just as he yanked his hand free. Grease streaked his knuckles. The sleeve of his coverall smoked at the cuff. Another second and the whole bench would have gone up in a cheap fireworks show. He slapped the cutoff switch, heart thumping steadily against his ribs, and let the silence settle over the workshop like dust. Jack 17 hovered in from the parts rack, red eye blinking lazy Morse. "Third overload this week, boss. At this rate, the fire marshal's gonna start sending you love notes." Nolan wiped his brow with the back of a wrist, leaving a fresh smear. "Love notes I can afford. New compressors? Not so much." Outside the open bay, violet dusk bled across Rust Haven Port. Aurelis V's twin suns dipped behind skeletal cranes, painting every dented hull the color of bruised plums. The air smelled of ozone, fried circuitry, and the faint tang of someone's dinner drifting from the lower docks. Nolan's stomach gave a quiet growl. He reached for the small camp stove wedged between tool chests, thumbed the burner alive, and dropped a pat of synth butter into the dented pan. It hissed, softened, turned gold. Simple smells, honest smells, the kind that reminded a man he was still breathing. Footsteps scraped the threshold, light ones, then smaller ones. Nolan glanced up. A woman stood in the doorway, coat patched at the elbows, silver hair escaping a frayed hood. In her arms, she carried a child no heavier than a toolbox, cheeks hollow, eyes too big for the face. The little girl's fingers clutched a purple doll missing its left arm. The woman's voice came out thin, like paper held to a flame. You fix things, right?" Nolan set the spatula aside. "Ships, drones, the occasional broken heart. Depends on the spare parts." He tried a grin. It felt rusty. "Come in before the wind changes its mind." They stepped inside. The woman, Celine Varys, she said, lowered her sister Mira onto the only cleanish stool. Mira's legs dangled, not quite touching the floor. The doll stayed clamped against her chest like a shield. Jack 17 spun a slow circle, scanning. 2 life signs, elevated cortisol, malnutrition markers, recommend carbohydrates, protein, and emotional support. A pause. "I can provide the first 2. Nolan rolled his eyes. "Show off." He tore yesterday's loaf in half, slathered it thick with the melted butter, and poured hot water into powdered broth until it looked almost like soup. The scent rose between them, warm and improbable. He slid the meal across the workbench on cracked plates. Celine hesitated, then took a piece of toast. Mira copied her, small bite, smaller bite, eyes closing as butter met tongue. A whisper slipped out, barely louder than the stove's click. "Tastes like peace." Nolan's throat tightened. He busied himself wiping a non-existent spill. Peace was a tall order in Rust Haven, but buttered toast? That he could manage. The moment was shattered with the clang of boots on metal grating. A thick-shouldered man filled the doorway, flanked by 2 others in syndicate gray. Dargan, Nolan recognized the scar that split the left eyebrow, stepped forward, data slate glowing. "Celine Varys, Mira Varys. Debt outstanding. 5,000 credits. Parental default. Payment due." Celine's hand found Mira's shoulder. We're working on it." Dargan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Work faster. 3 days. After that, the mines take what's owed." His gaze slid to Nolan. "Unless the mechanic wants to cover it, generous types end up popular down below." Nolan felt the weight of every unpaid bill in his own ledger. 5,000 credits might as well have been 5 million, but the kid's whisper still hung in the air like steam. He heard himself speaking before the math caught up. 3 days, I'll get it." Dargan's laugh scraped like a rusty hinge. "Clock starts now, hero." The syndicate men left, boots echoing down the dock. Jack 17's eye dimmed to a thoughtful amber. Probability of success, 0.03%. "Shall I prepare your resume for the mines?" Nolan ignored the drone, turning to Celine. "You said something about a ship." She nodded, swallowing the last of the broth. "The Starling, pre-war courier. Been rusting in Dock 17 since I was Mira's age. Parents used to talk about it, said it still had good bones." Nolan grabbed a flashlight, a multi-tool, and the half loaf of bread. "Bones, I can work with." Dock 17 lay at the port's forgotten edge, where gantries leaned like tired old men. The Starling rested under a tarp stiff with grime, hull lines sleek once upon a time. Nolan peeled the cover back. Corrosion flaked away in red snow. He ran a hand along the flank, felt the faint hum of dormant systems waiting for a pulse. Inside, the cockpit smelled of stale air and lost chances. Mira settled into the pilot's seat, doll in lap, tiny fingers tracing cracked upholstery. Celine brushed dust from the nav console, revealing faded stencils. Alliance Relief Corps. Nolan knelt by the port bulkhead, shining his light into a ventilation grate clogged with decades of debris. His fingers closed around something soft, fabric over hard edges. He pulled it free. A second purple doll, a mirror image of Mira's, missing the right arm. Celine's breath caught. They match. Nolan turned the dolls so the stumps faced each other. Where fabric met seam, thin silver threads glinted, too regular for decoration, too delicate for reinforcement. He held them to the cockpit's emergency light. The threads shimmered, forming patterns that hurt to follow, like trying to read wind on water. Jack 17 drifted in, scanning. Material anomaly, metallic filament lattice. Quantum scale entanglement is probable. A soft whir. Also, butter residue on the left doll. Someone's been stress eating. Mira hugged both dolls now, arms full for the first time. Nolan felt the weight of the 3-day clock settle on his shoulders, but underneath it something else stirred. Curiosity, stubborn and warm. He pocketed the dolls, ushered the sisters ahead of him into the violet night. Back in the workshop, he fired up the stove again. More toast, more soup. Small things, maybe. But the smell of butter rose steadily, pushing back the dark just enough to see the next step. Tomorrow they'd strip the Starling for parts, hunt the junk markets, chase whatever secret slept inside 2 broken dolls. Tonight, 3 bowls steamed on the bench and the compressor stayed quiet. The next morning tasted of burnt coffee and possibility. Nolan cracked the workshop shutters. Violet dawn spilled across oil-stained concrete, turning every puddle into a tiny galaxy. Celine stood at the bench, sleeves rolled high, sorting wires by gauge with the calm focus of someone who'd once plotted courses between stars. Mira perched on a crate, legs swinging, both purple dolls lined up like silent co-pilots. Jack 17 projected a holographic checklist above the Starling's gutted engine cowling. Priority 1, K-class regulator. Priority 2, clean capacitors. Priority 3, remind Nolan humans require sleep. I'm fine, Nolan muttered, though the bags under his eyes argued otherwise. Celine glanced up. You fixed the port thruster coupling in 30 minutes last night. That's not fine. That's scary efficient. He shrugged, cheeks warming. Ships don't lie. People do. They left the Starling half disassembled, tools scattered like metallic confetti, and trekked to the morning junk market. Rust Haven's bazaar sprawled across 3 levels of catwalks and cargo nets, vendors hawking everything from cracked visors to mystery meat on sticks. The air buzzed with haggling, the sizzle of fry pans, and the occasional spark of a short-circuiting holocene. Nolan's pockets held one treasure, a single Earth-made chocolate bar, vacuum-sealed, label faded but intact. Real cocoa, rarer than honest accountants. He'd been saving it for a rainy day, or maybe a desperate one. At a stall draped in a salvaged solar sail, an old woman with chrome fingernails inspected the bar. Authentic Terran, you're either sentimental or suicidal, Reed. Sentimental's cheaper, he said. Need a K-class regulator, clean one. She rummaged, produced a matte black cylinder no longer than his thumb. Last one. Came off a courier that never made port. Her gaze flicked to Mira, who clutched the dolls and stared wide-eyed at a spinning skewer of glazed something. Kid gets the chocolate. Deal? Nolan handed it over without hesitation. Mira's fingers closed around the bar like it might vanish. She broke off a corner, offered it to Selena first. Sister protocol, apparently. Celine smiled, small, tired, real, and they shared the square. The old vendor pretended not to watch the moment, but her prices softened anyway. Back at the dock, Nolan slotted the regulator into the Starling's power grid. It clicked home with the satisfying snick of parts that still remembered how to behave. Celine ran diagnostics on a cracked tablet. Green telltales blossomed across the screen like hopeful algae. Jack 17 hovered over the dolls, bathing them in polarized violet light from its underbelly projector. The silver seams ignited, threads unraveling into fractal lattices that danced across the drone's sensor dome. Numbers scrolled too fast to follow. Quantum cryptographic key pair, Jax announced. Public half embedded in the left doll, Private in the right. Entangled state stable despite butter contamination. Celine leaned closer. That's Alliance Ledger format. Pre-war relief fund. My parents used to file claims before the syndicate froze everything. Nolan's pulse quickened. Frozen how? Shell companies, fake audits. They rerouted aid into private accounts, then blamed clerical errors. Her voice flattened. People like us got debt notices instead of rations. Mira traced a seam with one finger. The dolls are keys? Looks like, Nolan said. But keys need a lock, and locks need power. He paced the narrow cockpit, boots scuffing decades of dust. The Starling's reactor sat cold but intact, military grade, overbuilt for courier runs through hot zones. If he bypassed the propulsion circuit, rerouted output through a static manifold, he sketched on a grease-stained napkin, soup cans as capacitors, satellite dishes for directional gain, the reactor idling like a sleeping dragon. Celine watched the numbers take shape. We'd need a 17-minute window. Orbital alignment opens a gap in the syndicate's jamming net every 72 hours. Next one's tomorrow night. Jack 17 spun. Power draw will light us up like a festival. Syndicate monitors every kilowatt. Nolan tapped the napkin. Not if we're already burning fuel for routine maintenance. Cover story, prepping the Starling for sale. He met Celine's eyes. We don't sell the engine. We borrow it. She nodded slowly, the motion of someone stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. Afternoon bled into evening. They worked by lantern light, hands moving in practiced tandem. Nolan stripped insulation with his teeth. Celine soldered microjoints finer than eyelashes. Mira ferried tools, humming tunelessly, dolls tucked under one arm like faithful crew. At some point, Nolan produced more bread, more butter. The simple act anchored them. Knead, spread, bite, repeat. Grease and cinnamon mingled until the cockpit smelled like a kitchen that had forgotten it was a spaceship. Jack 17 projected the final schematic, a glowing web of scavenged parts converging on the dolls. Transmission array complete. Efficiency, 68%. Margin of error, plus or minus one dramatic failure. Good enough for government work, Nolan said. Outside, the port lights flickered on, sodium orange against violet sky. Somewhere in the distance, a shuttle roared skyward, rich folk heading for cleaner air. Nolan watched the contrail fade and felt the 3-day clock tick louder. Celine set the tablet down. If this works, thousands of accounts unfreeze. Debts flagged for review. The syndicate loses its leverage overnight. And if it doesn't? He didn't really need to ask. She looked at Mira, asleep on a pile of thermal blankets, dolls cradled close. Then we're all headed to the mines. But at least we tried. Nolan felt the weight settle, not crushing, shared. He reached out, brushed a strand of silver hair from her cheek without thinking. She didn't pull away. Jack 17 dimmed its lights. Romantic subroutines detecting elevated heart rates. Recommend returning to work before someone does something embarrassing. They laughed, quiet, surprised, the sound of two people remembering they still could. Later, Nolan lay on the cockpit floor staring at the ceiling, reactor schematics dancing behind his eyelids. The dolls rested on the console, seams faintly glowing whenever the workshop lights flickered. Two broken toys holding a fortune in mercy. He drifted toward sleep on the smell of cooling metal and the soft rhythm of Celine breathing nearby. Tomorrow they'd finish the array. Tomorrow night, the window opened. Tonight, the Starling dreamed of flight, and 3 fugitives dreamed with her. Dawn crept in sideways, slipping through the Starling's cracked viewport in thin violet blades. Nolan woke with a crick in his neck and the faint taste of solder on his tongue. Celine was already up, tablet balanced on one knee, tracing orbital paths with a grease pencil. Mira sat cross-legged on the deck, arranging soup cans into a perfect circle around the dolls, like a tiny fortress of tin. Jack 17 hovered above the reactor housing, projecting a soft blue grid. Static manifold 87% assembled. Remaining tasks: weld final bus bar, calibrate phase lock, resist urge to panic. Panic's a luxury, Nolan said, stretching until his spine popped. We're on the clock. He fired up the portable welder. Sparks showered like brief orange rain. Celine steadied the bus bar, thick copper scavenged from a gutted cargo lift, while he laid a bead hot enough to fuse stubborn atoms. The smell of molten metal mixed with yesterday's butter, creating something uniquely theirs. Mira tugged his sleeve. Will the cans really help? Capacitors in a pinch, he told her. Every kitchen's got a reactor if you know where to look. She nodded solemnly, then added another can to the array. The dolls watched from the center, silver seams catching stray sparks and throwing them back as tiny rainbows. By midday, the transmission rig looked less like junk and more like art. Satellite dishes angled skyward on improvised gimbals, wired through a lattice of soup cans and stripped power conduits. Jack 17 ran a low-power test. The doll's threads pulsed once, steady like a heartbeat. Celine exhaled. 17 minutes start at 22:47. We'll have one shot before the jamming net cycles. Nolan wiped sweat from his brow. Then we make it count. They broke for food. More toast, a jar of violet jam Mira had found in a forgotten crate. The jam tasted of cinnamon and engine coolant, which felt about right. Nolan spread it thick, watching the sisters eat with the careful focus of people who'd forgotten meals could be an elibration instead of survival. The afternoon brought foot traffic. Dock workers drifted by, curious about the activity in Bay 17. Nolan spun the cover story smoothly, prepping the Starling for auction. A few nodded, impressed by the reactor's vintage lines. One old-timer even offered a spare coil of shielded cable. For luck, he said. Nolan accepted with genuine thanks. Luck was another commodity in short supply. As Violet deepened toward true night, the port settled into its evening rhythm, shuttles throttling down, neon signs flickering alive, the distant clank of cargo arms. Nolan ran final diagnostics. Power curves looked clean, phase lock held steady. The dolls sat in their cradle of cans, seams glowing faint but constant. Jack 17's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Syndicate patrol patterns shifted. Dargan's crew is running early sweeps. Probability of premature confrontation. Rising. Nolan's stomach tightened. How early? Could be minutes. Could be hours. Math hates specifics. Celine checked the chronometer on her wrist. 21:30. They had time, if the universe cooperated. They moved the final pieces into place. Nolan rigged a remote trigger from the cockpit. Celine double-checked orbital vectors. Mira stayed close. Dolls now zipped inside her coat for safekeeping. The reactor idled at minimal output, a sleeping giant waiting for its cue. Then the bay doors rattled. Not the casual clank of workers, the deliberate thud of boots. Nolan killed the overheads, leaving only the reactor's soft blue glow. Shadows stretched long across the deck. Victor Hale stepped into the half-light, suit impeccable, smile polished to a predatory sheen. Two guards flanked him, stun battens humming low. Dargan wasn't among them. Interesting. Miss Varys, Hale said, voice smooth as oiled bearings. Such talent wasting away in a mechanic's shadow. I have an opening in hospitality services. Private shuttle, private quarters. Your debt vanishes. Your sister attends the finest academy on the inner ring. Celine's chin lifted. I'm not for sale. Hale's gaze slid to Nolan. And you, Mr. Reed, always the altruist. 5,000 credits is a small price for peace. Walk away. Let the girls come with me. Nolan felt the remote trigger warm in his palm. Peace tastes better with butter on it. Hale sighed theatrically. Regrettable, he gestured. The guards advanced. Nolan thumbed the trigger early, too early. The reactor spooled with a rising whine, lights flaring white. Soup cans rattled in their sockets. Jack 17 shot upward, projecting a blinding strobe into the guards' visors. They stumbled, cursing. Window's not open yet, Celine shouted over the growing roar. Buying us one anyway. Nolan grabbed Mira, hoisted her toward the cockpit. Celine sprinted ahead, fingers flying across the console. Hale shouted orders, voice cracking for the first time. The reactor hit 80%. Hot, unstable, but alive. Jack 17 dove, ramming a guard's knee joint. The man went down hard. The second swung his baton. Jax took the hit, spun wildly, then righted itself with a cheerful ping. Structural integrity nominal. Ego slightly bruised. Nolan slammed the cockpit hatch, dogged it tight. Through the viewport, he saw Hale retreating toward the bay doors, face twisted in calculation. The man wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Celine strapped Mira into the co-pilot seat. The dolls tumbled free. Silver seams blazed as the reactor's energy field brushed them. On the main screen, a single line of text flickered. Quantum pair detected. Awaiting authentication. 22:43. 4 minutes early. The orbital window cracked open ahead of schedule. Maybe a satellite drifted. Maybe the universe took pity. Nolan fed power to the array. Soup cans glowed cherry red. Dishes tilted skyward like flowers chasing starlight. Celine's hands danced over controls. Channels clean. Broadcasting now. The dolls are locked into the cradle. Light poured from their seams, pure, coherent, threading through the makeshift optics like liquid starfire. Data packets surged upward, riding the narrow beam toward the relay satellites. Outside, the bay doors buckled inward. Dargan's voice boomed through a bullhorn. "Reed! Power down or we breach!" Nolan ignored him. The screen filled with cascading code, ledger entries, transaction hashes, shell company filaments unraveling in real time. Somewhere in the interstellar dark, legal nodes woke up and took notice. Mira pressed her face to the viewport. "Look!" Public feeds on every dock screen lit up. Names, accounts, debts marked disputed. Workers stopped mid-stride, staring as their own burdens vanished in green text. A cheer rose, tentative, then thunderous. The reactor screamed past redline. Warning klaxons howled. Nolan cut propulsion interlocks, rerouted everything to thrust. The Starling shuddered, deck plates vibrating like a drum. "Hold on!" He slammed the throttle. The ship lurched, chains snapping like cheap string. Through the viewport, dock workers waved, not in anger, but in farewell. Dargan stood frozen amid the chaos, bullhorn forgotten. The Starling climbed, engine note pure and fierce, soup can array trailing sparks like a comet's tail. Behind them, Rusthaven Port shrank to a glittering scar on Aurealis V's night side. Mira laughed, bright, disbelieving. Celine's hand found Nolan's on the yoke. For 17 perfect minutes, they rode a beam of light and buttered hope straight into the stars. Then the window closed, the array burned out, and the reactor coughed itself to silence. But the message was away. The dolls' seams dimmed to embers, job done. In the sudden quiet, Nolan smelled scorched metal and cinnamon. They were free. Temporarily, spectacularly free. And somewhere below, an empire of debt had just cracked wide open. The Starling drifted in high orbit, engines cooling with soft metallic ticks that echoed through the hull like a slowing heartbeat. Nolan eased the throttle to idle, letting momentum carry them along the curve of Aurealis 5. Below, the planet's night side glittered. Rusthaven Port, a ragged wound of light, the rest swallowed in violet shadow. The soup can array hung in tatters outside the viewport, blackened and silent, but the data was gone, flung across the void to places where laws still had teeth. Celine unstrapped Mira, who floated in the low gravity, dolls clutched tight. The child's eyes were wide, reflecting starfields and the faint glow of the console. "Are we flying?" "For now," Nolan said, voice rough from shouting over reactor noise. "Long enough to breathe." Jack 17 bobbed near the ceiling, one corner dented from the baton hit. "Hull integrity 94%, ego still bruised. Recommend evasive loafing?" Celine laughed, short, startled, the sound of glass breaking in reverse. She pulled up the public feeds on a side screen. Dock worker channels overflowed, names scrolling, debts zeroing out, syndicate enforcers standing down under the weight of their own ledgers. Someone had looped a grainy video of Dargan lowering his weapon, face slack with the realization that his boss's name sat at the top of the corruption chain. Nolan watched the numbers climb. 200 accounts freed, 500, 1,000. Each green flash felt like a small explosion in his chest, warm, expanding. Mira tugged his sleeve. "Can we go back? For toast?" He ruffled her hair. "Soon, kid. Toast tastes better on solid ground." But solid ground was complicated now. The Starling's transponders still squawked pre-war alliance codes, technically a ghost ship. Syndicate shuttles would scramble soon, and Victor Hale wasn't the type to lick wounds in private. Celine's fingers danced over the nav console. "There's a debris ring at Lagrange 4. Old relay station, half functional. We can hide, patch the array, maybe boost a second signal if the first gets jammed." Nolan nodded. "Lead the way, navigator." They burned a careful arc, thrusters whispering. The debris ring swallowed them. Twisted girders, frozen coolant clouds, the skeletons of satellites long dead. The Starling nestled into the shadow of a cracked solar array, engines dimming to ember. Inside, the cockpit felt almost homey. Nolan raided the emergency locker. Vacuum-sealed bread, more synth butter, a dented tin of cinnamon. He fired the small galley burner. The smell rose steadily, pushing back the scent of scorched wiring. Mira set the table. 3 cracked mugs, spoons lined up like landing struts. They ate floating crumbs in quiet triumph. Jack 17 projected a soft star map, marking the path the data had taken. Relay to relay, node to node. waking legal algorithms that hadn't stirred since the war. Interstellar courts have acknowledged receipt, the drone announced. Preliminary injunction issued. Syndicate assets frozen pending investigation. Celine's shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in release. It's real. Nolan handed her a mug of weak tea. Real enough to burn soup cans for. Hours slipped by in companionable tinkering. Nolan patched the array with spare foil and prayer. Celine recalibrated the doll's cradle, coaxing one last pulse from their seams. Mira napped in the co-pilot seat, dolls tucked under her chin like twin pillows. Outside, the debris ring turned slow circles around Oriolis 5. Inside, the reactor cooled to a gentle thrum. Nolan found himself watching Celine work. Silver hair escaping its tie, grease on her cheek, eyes bright with the same stubborn hope that had kept him fixing broken things long past profit. She caught him looking. What? Just thinking. Buttered toast started this. Feels fitting. She smiled, small and crooked. Next meal's on me. Real butter. None of this synth stuff. Jack 17 interrupted with a soft chime. Incoming tight beam. Encrypted. Alliance judicial signature. Nolan's pulse skipped. They patched it through. A woman's voice, calm and official. Starling, this is Magistrate Lyra Voss, 3rd Circuit. Your transmission has been verified. Relief fund access restored. We require witness statements and the quantum keys for the chain of custody. Coordinates attached, safe passage guaranteed. The line went quiet. Coordinates glowed on the nav screen. A neutral way station, 2 jumps coreward. Celine stared at the numbers. They want us to testify, in person. Nolan felt the weight settle again. Different this time. Responsibility, not debt. Means landing. Means facing Hale's lawyers. Mira stirred, rubbing her eyes. Will there be toast there? Buckets of it, Nolan promised. They plotted the course. One short burn to clear the debris, then a micro jump through an unregulated gate. Risky, but the Starling was built for courier runs. Fast in, fast out. Nolan spooled the reactor. Celine locked the dolls into a padded case. Jack 17 ran stealth protocols, masking their signature in the ring's clutter. As they lit the engines, a syndicate patrol cutter nosed into the outer edge of the debris field. Too late, too slow. The Starling slipped away on a whisper of plasma, leaving the hunter sniffing cold metal. 2 hours later, they punched through the gate. Stars stretched, snapped, reformed. The way station hung ahead, a modest ring of docks and hab modules, neutral ground under treaty law. Shuttles bearing judicial seals waited in orderly rows. Nolan cut thrust, letting inertia carry them in. Home stretch. Celine's hand brushed his on the yoke. Brief, steadying. Mira pressed her face to the viewport, dolls forgotten in her lap. Docking clamps engaged with a gentle thud. Magistrate Voss met them at the airlock. Tall, silver-streaked, eyes kind but sharp. She knelt to Mira's level. Heard you brought the keys to a kingdom, little one. Mira offered the case solemnly. Voss accepted it like fragile glass. Statements took hours. Calm voices, detailed logs, Jack 17 projecting holograms of the transmission array down to the last soup can. Nolan's hands shook only once when Voss asked about the reactor overload. He described it in clipped sentences. Power curves, phase locks. The moment the dolls lit up like twin suns. When they finished, Voss sealed the record. The fund will be fully reinstated within 72 hours. Debts erased, assets seized. You've done more than open an account. You've reminded the Alliance what it was built for. Outside the conference room, refugees lined the corridors. Families clutching printouts of cleared balances, dock workers in borrowed finery. Someone had set up a table. Fresh bread, real butter, jars of violet jam. The smell drifted down the hall like an invitation. Mira tugged Nolan toward it. He let her lead. Later, back aboard the Starling, now under judicial impound but granted crew quarters. Nolan stood on the observation deck. Oriolis 5 was a distant marble, storms swirling over Rusthaven like slow-motion bruises. Celine joined him, 2 mugs in hand. Tea, she said. Real leaves. Voss's treat. He took one, warmth seeping through the ceramic. What happens to us? Witness protection, if we want it. New names, new ports. She sipped, eyes on the stars. Or we stay, help distribute the fund, turn the Starling into something permanent. Nolan considered. The ship hummed beneath their feet, alive again. I've got a workshop full of half-fixed dreams back on Rusthaven. Could use a navigator. She bumped his shoulder. And a cook? Mira's voice floated up from the ladder. And toast! They laughed. Easy, full, the sound of people who'd earned it. Far below, Victor Hale's luxury shuttle sat grounded, engines cold. Dargan had vanished into protective custody, singing every note he knew. The syndicate's web unraveled thread by thread, each tug loosening chains on 1,000 necks. Nolan raised his mug to the viewport. To butter and stubborn kids and soup cans that saved the galaxy. Celine clinked hers against it. To second chances. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and ancient. But for the first time in years, Nolan felt the future leaning close. Warm, possible, smelling faintly of cinnamon. The way station's corridors smelled of fresh paint and recycled hope. Nolan walked them at a deliberate pace, boots echoing softly against polished deck plates. Celine matched his stride, Mira half a step ahead, swinging the empty doll case like a lunchbox. The purple toys themselves rested in Magistrate Voss's vault now. Evidence, symbols, relics of a night that still felt half-dream. They'd been given quarters, 2 small cabins connected by a shared galley, portholes looking out on the slow spin of the ring. Nolan's fingers itched for tools. Instead, he found himself folding tiny socks, stacking ration packs, turning the space into something that might pass for home. Jack 17 floated in, projecting a newsfeed on the bulkhead. Update, relief fund disbursements began at 400 station time. First wave, 300 families relocated from Outer Rim debt camps. Second wave scheduled for... Celine muted it with a wave. We'll read the summaries later. Her voice carried the gentle fatigue of someone who'd won but hadn't slept. Mira climbed onto the lower bunk, legs dangling. When do we go get the Starling? Nolan exchanged a look with Celine. The ship was still impounded, technicians crawling over her guts, cataloging every scorch mark on the soup can array. Soon, he said, they want to make her a museum piece first. Mira's nose wrinkled. Museums are boring. Ships are for flying. Kids got a point, Nolan admitted. The afternoon brought a summons. Voss's aide led them to a larger conference ring where folding tables had been pushed aside for folding chairs. Refugees filled the space, some in coveralls still dusted with Rust-Haven grime, others in borrowed station jumpsuits. A low murmur rose as Nolan entered. Heads turned, nods offered like quiet salutes. Voss stood at the far end beside a holo display. The Starling rotated slowly above the projector, soup can array highlighted in pulsing gold. These people, she said, voice carrying without effort, want to meet the crew who remembered what the Alliance forgot. A woman near the front stood, older, hands calloused from years on ore loaders. My boy's debt was 22,000 credits. Gone this morning. He starts flight school next cycle. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but with plans. Thank you. Another voice, rough. Brought my mother out of the camps. She asked for buttered bread. First thing. Laughter rippled, warm and ragged. Nolan felt heat climb his neck. He raised a hand awkwardly. Wasn't just us. Was toast and stubborn kids and a drone with attitude. Jack 17 projected a tiny bow. Attitude is 90% charm. The room laughed again, louder. Someone produced a tray. Real bread, real butter, violet jam in paper cups. The smell drifted like incense. Mira darted forward, claimed a slice, and brought it back to share. Crumbs fell like confetti. Later in the corridor, Voss pulled Nolan aside. We need a face for the fund's outreach. Someone who isn't bureaucracy. The Starling could tour the rim, deliver supplies, take statements, show people the system still works. Celine's eyebrow arched. You want us to be poster children? I want you to be proof, Voss said. Proof that one meal, one open hand, can change trajectories. Nolan rubbed the back of his neck. I'm a mechanic, not a diplomat. You fixed a warship with kitchen scraps. Diplomacy's easier. They walked back in silence, broken only by Mira humming the rhythm of docking clamps. In the galley, Nolan fired the burner out of habit. Butter hissed, bread toasted to golden. Celine leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. We could do it, she said. Fly the rim, fix things, feed people. Keep the Starling breathing. Keep us breathing. Mira climbed onto a stool, chin on folded arms. And toast? Nolan slid a plate across. Endless toast. Night cycle dimmed the station lights to star glow. Nolan stood at the porthole watching freighters glide past like slow whales. Celine joined him, shoulder to shoulder. Victor Hale's in custody, she said quietly. Tried to bribe his way onto a liner. Accounts frozen solid. Good. Dargan's testifying. Full immunity for the data dump. Nolan exhaled. Feels light. Like the air's thinner up here. She bumped him gently. That's freedom, Nolan. You'll get used to it. He wasn't sure he wanted to. The weight of debt had been a constant so long, its absence left a hollow he kept expecting to ache. Instead, it hummed. Possibility, sharp as ozone after rain. Jack 17 drifted in, projecting a new schematic. The Starling refitted with expanded cargo bays, hydroponic trays, and a proper galley. Modest upgrades, room for butter reserves. Celine traced the hollow with one finger. We'll need a crew. Dock workers owe us favors, Nolan said. Some might want to see the stars without chains. Mira's voice floated from the bunk room. Can we paint soup cans on the hull? Honorary battle damage, Nolan agreed. They launched 3 days later. The impound lifted. Technicians stepped back with something like reverence. The Starling's hull gleamed, patches polished, soup can scars left proud. A small crowd gathered at the dock. Refugees, magistrates, station crew. Someone started a chant, soft at first, then rolling. Toast! 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 Nolan flushed crimson, but Celine laughed and waved. Mira stood on the ramp, doll back in her arms, returned from the evidence locker with a judicial seal that read, Property of Hope. Engines spooled, warm and eager. Nolan took the pilot's seat. Celine slid into navigation. Jack 17 claimed the overhead rack. Mira buckled into a booster, feet kicking. Course? Nolan asked. Celine tapped coordinates. First stop, KL9. Refugee convoy needs water purifiers and butter. He engaged thrust. The Starling slipped her moorings smooth as thought, ring lights sliding past the viewport. Behind them, the way station shrank to a bright coin. Ahead, the rim waited. Colonies bruised but breathing, people learning the taste of tomorrow. In the galley, the burner clicked on automatically. Timer set for arrival. Butter waited in the pan, patient as sunrise. Nolan felt the hollow fill, not with weight but with motion. The ship hummed beneath his hands, alive and aimed true. Somewhere below, chains lay empty on dock plates, rusting in clean air. He smiled. Small, fierce, certain. The Starling flew and the galaxy learned a new recipe. 1 part courage, 2 parts kitchen scraps, a generous spread of hope. Serve warm. The Starling dropped out of the jump with a shiver that ran from bow to stern, like a dog shaking off cold water. KL9 hung ahead, a rust-red moon orbiting a gas giant striped in bruised orange. Refugee tents dotted the surface in orderly rows, white fabric fluttering against dust devils. Nolan eased the throttle, lining up on the designated landing grid, a patch of fused regolith marked with fresh paint and a hand-lettered sign that read, Welcome, Toast Ship. Celine checked the manifest. 40 purifiers, 20 crates of nutrient paste, and 1 industrial butter churn, courtesy of the Relief Fund. She glanced at Mira, who bounced in her booster seat, and 200 loaves of real bread. Mira's eyes went round. All for us? For sharing, Nolan corrected gently. But we get the first slice. Jack 17 projected landing vectors. Surface winds gusting to 30 knots. Recommend dramatic flare on touchdown. Nolan rolled his eyes but couldn't hide the grin. He feathered the thrusters, settling the Starling with barely a kiss of dust. Clamps locked. Ramp hissed down. Heat rolled in, dry, metallic, carrying the faint sweetness of alien sage. A delegation waited, camp administrator in a faded jumpsuit, 2 kids clutching hand-drawn banners, purple dolls with soup can halos. The administrator stepped forward, voice cracking over the comm. Heard you were coming. Didn't believe it till the butter smell hit the atmosphere. Nolan descended the ramp, boots crunching on regolith. Celine followed with a crate balanced on one hip. Mira scampered ahead, dolls tucked under her arm like old friends. The crowd parted, then closed around them, warm, murmuring, smelling of hope and unwashed days. They offloaded purifiers first, sleek units that hummed to life with a touch, pulling water from the moon's thin air. Nolan showed a cluster of teenagers how to maintain the filters, greased pencil sketching diagrams on a crate lid. Celine organized bread lines, thick slices, butter melting into golden pools. Mira handed out paper cups of violet jam, solemn as a priest. A boy no older than Mira tugged Nolan's sleeve. My dad says you blew up the syndicate with soup cans. More like annoyed them into submission, Nolan said. Soup cans don't explode. They just hold charge. The boy nodded, satisfied. He ran off to tell his father the corrected legend. Evening settled fast on Kale 9. Sky bleeding from copper to indigo, the gas giant rising like a lantern. Nolan fired portable stoves along the supply line. Butter hissed, bread toasted. The smell drifted across the tent city, drawing people like moths. Someone produced a battered guitar. Another started a soft rhythm on an empty crate. Voices joined, hesitant, then strong. Celine found Nolan near the churn, sleeves rolled, forearms slick with effort. "We're short on jam, long on gratitude." He wiped his brow. "Gratitude doesn't spread well on toast." She laughed, then sobered. "Got a message from Voss. Hale's trial starts in 2 weeks. They want us there." Visual impact. Nolan's stomach dipped. "Thought we were done with courts." "Thought wrong." She nudged him. "But we'll bring bread. Bribe the jury." Mira ran up, cheeks flushed. "They want to see the dolls?" Nolan lifted her onto his shoulders. Together they walked to the central fire, a ring of stones glowing with chemical logs. The administrator had cleared a space. Mira set the dolls on a crate pedestal. Someone dimmed the floods. Portable spotlights bathed the purple fabric in soft white. Silence fell, thick as butter. Then a woman stepped forward, older, eyes filmed with age. She placed a hand on each doll. "My husband died in the mines. Debt transferred to me. This morning it vanished." Her voice shook. "These little things, they gave him back his name." Murmurs rippled. Hands reached out, not to take, but to touch. The dolls passed from palm to palm, seams catching firelight. Stories followed, children born in debt camps, weddings postponed, dreams deferred. Each telling was lighter than the last, as if speaking. The weight made it float away. Nolan felt Celine's fingers lace through his. He squeezed once. Mira leaned down from his shoulders, whispering, "They're crying happy." "Yeah," he whispered back. "Happy tastes like butter." Later, under a sky pricked with unfamiliar stars, Nolan stood alone by the Starling's ramp. The camp slept in pockets of quiet, stoves cooled to embers. He ran a hand along the hull, soup can scars proud under fresh paint. A shadow detached from the darkness. Dargan, hood up, face half lit by the giant's glow. Nolan tensed. "Come to collect?" Dargan shook his head. "Came to return." He held out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "From the old shop. Figured you'd want it." Nolan took it. His camp stove, dented but intact, the one he'd left behind in the chaos. A note tucked beneath. "Rust Haven sends regards. Keep the butter warm." "Why?" Nolan asked. Dargan shrugged. "Saw my name on the list. Cleared. Syndicate's done. I'm just a guy with a debt that isn't there anymore." He met Nolan's eyes. "You gave me a second chance I didn't ask for. The least I can do is not waste it." He melted back into the dark before Nolan could reply. Inside the ship, Celine had the galley lit low. Mira slept curled on the fold-out bunk, dolls under her cheek. Nolan set the stove on the counter, fired it out of muscle memory. Butter hissed. The smell filled the small space like a promise kept. Celine leaned in the doorway. "Tomorrow we jump to Vera's Reach. Bigger camp. Syndicate remnants stirring." Nolan flipped a slice of bread, golden on one side. "Then we bring bigger toast." She moved closer, rested her chin on his shoulder. "And after the trial?" He turned the bread, steam curling between them. "After, we keep flying, keep fixing, keep feeding." He paused, voice softening. "Keep choosing the next right thing." Outside, the gas giant climbed higher, rings glinting like a crown. Inside, butter melted slowly and deliberately. The Starling waited. Engines cool, heart warm, ready for whatever sky came next. Nolan plated the toast, cut it diagonally, the way Mira liked. One bite for the past, one for the present, the rest for tomorrow. Endless, golden, and spreading. The tribunal chamber sat in the hollowed core of a decommissioned battle carrier. Justice ascendant, its bulkhead stripped of weapons and lined instead with transparent aluminum. Light from the system's blue-white sun poured through, turning every face into sharp relief. Nolan stood at the witness rail in a borrowed jacket 2 sizes too formal, collar itching like a lie. Celine waited beside him, hair pinned back, eyes steady. Mira had been given a booster seat between them, dolls tucked in a velvet pouch on the table. Exhibits A1 and A2, officially. Victor Hale occupied the defendant's dock, suit still crisp, but cuffs now magnetic. His smile had thinned to a blade. Across the aisle, Dargan sat in witness gray, shoulders hunched, scar livid under the lights. Syndicate lawyers shuffled data slates like nervous cards. Magistrate Voss presided from a raised dais, robes midnight blue. Prosecution calls Nolan Reed. Nolan stepped forward. The deck vibrated faintly. Old warship bones remembering thrust. A hollow flickered to life above the rail. The Starling's soup can array, rotating slowly, scorch marks proud. Describe the device, Voss said. Nolan cleared his throat. Transmission rig, scrap dishes, copper bus, 23 soup cans for capacitance, reactor in static mode. Dolls provided the quantum key. A defense lawyer rose, voice oily. You expect this court to believe kitchen refuse unlocked a multi-billion credit fund? Nolan met Hale's eyes. Worked well enough to freeze your shuttle, didn't it? Laughter rippled through the public gallery. Dock workers, refugees, a few journalists wearing butterpin badges. Voss allowed it for 3 heartbeats before gaveling silence. Celine took the stand next. She laid out orbital mechanics in calm sentences. 17-minute window, satellite drift, the exact millisecond the doll synced. Her voice never wavered, but Nolan saw her fingers tremble against the rail. He reached across the gap, brushed her knuckles. She squeezed once, then continued. Mira's turn came last. The booster seat raised her to eye level with the bench. Voss leaned forward. Young citizen, can you tell us what the dolls mean to you? Mira considered, small brow furrowed. They were broken. Nolan fixed them. Then they fixed everybody. She pulled the pouch closer. They smell like toast now. The gallery laughed again, softer, warmer. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. Hale's lawyer tried to rattle her. Did Mr. Reed coerce you into? Mira shook her head. He gave me butter. Coerce is a big word. I like butter. The court recessed for lunch. In the corridor, someone had set up folding tables. Fresh bread, churned butter, violet jam in glass bowls. The smell drifted into the chamber like evidence of its own. Nolan tore a hunk, passed half to Celine. Mira licked jam from her thumb, content. Afternoon brought the fireworks. Prosecution played the transmission logs, data packets streaking across the void, legal nodes lighting up like a constellation waking. Then came the shell company map. Hale's name pulsing red at the center, tendrils touching every frozen account. Dargan took the stand, voice gravelly. I enforced the debt, didn't know it was built on stolen aid. When the list dropped, my own mother's name was on it. Cleared. He looked at Hale. You told us it was clerical. It was theft. Hale surged to his feet. Lies, he's... Voss's gavel cracked like a railgun. Sit. The final piece. Jack 17 projected the dolls in real time, seams glowing as they re-established the quantum link inside the chamber. A live balance appeared above the dais. Alliance Relief Fund, active, 11,742 on 3 credits, dispersed and counting. The number climbed in gentle pulses, each tick a life unburdened. Hale's composure cracked. He lunged for the exhibits table. Magnetic cuffs snapped him short, but not before his fingers brushed the dolls. The seams flared white. Overload warning. The hollow balance froze, then flashed crimson. Tamper detected. Lockout engaged. Chaos threatened. Bailiffs moved. Nolan vaulted the rail without thinking, scooped Mira clear. Celine snatched the dolls, cradling them like live grenades. Jack 17 spun between them, projecting a containment field that shimmered blue. Quantum entanglement disrupted, the drone announced. Key pair intact. Hale's biometrics are now flagged across every node. Nice try, slick. Security hauled Hale away, shouting about appeals and lawyers. The gallery erupted, cheers, stomping, the rhythmic chant of toast, toast. Voss let it run, eyes bright. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. Assets seized, sentences to follow. The fund is placed under permanent civilian oversight, a rotating board, no single point of failure. The Starling is the flagship of the new distribution fleet. Outside the chamber, corridors filled with celebration. Someone uncorked sparkling cider. Buttered rolls circulated like currency. Nolan found himself shaking hands until his palm went numb. Celine accepted a butter pin shaped like a tiny soup can. Mira wore 3. Voss approached through the crowd, robes swirling. One last request. The outer rim needs a symbol. Fly the Starling to the edge. Show them the fund is real. The chains are gone. Nolan looked at Celine. She nodded once. Mira raised a sticky fist. Aye! They launched at dusk, Justice Ascendant shrinking behind them. The tribunal had refitted the Starling in secret. Cargo bays expanded, galley upgraded, hull painted midnight blue with a single gold stripe, soup can silhouette at the bow. Nolan took the helm. Celine plotted a course that would skim the galactic plane for months. Mira claimed the co-pilot seat, booster now permanent. Jack 17 projected the route. Red dots for camps, green for clear skies. Estimated toast consumption, 1.2 metric tons. Recommend increasing butter reserves. Nolan engaged thrust. The carrier fell away. Stars opened wide. In the galley, the burner clicked on. Timer set for the first colony dawn. Butter waited, patient as ever. Celine's hand found his on the yoke. Ready? He smiled, small, fierce, certain. Born ready. The Starling leapt, engines singing a low, warm note. Behind them, justice settled into law. Ahead, the rim waited, hungry, hopeful, ready for the smell of butter on the wind. One ship, one stove, a galaxy learning how to rise. The Starling flew for months along the ragged edge of known space, a blue-black needle threading violet nebulae and rust-colored dust lanes. Every colony stops blurred into the next. Dusty pads, eager faces, the hiss of a stove igniting like a heartbeat. Nolan kept the galley stocked. Celine kept the nav charts honest. Mira kept the dolls polished and the laughter loud. Jack 17 kept the running tally. Toast served. 14,137 slices and climbing. They hit the edge at a place called Drift 9, a hollowed asteroid turned refugee ark, lights flickering on emergency power. The docking ring groaned under the Starling's weight, clamps locked with a tired sigh. Nolan stepped onto the deck and smelled it immediately. Stale air, fear, the faint copper of ration packs gone bad. A woman met them, thin, eyes sharp, coveralls patched with hope. Heard you were real. Still didn't believe till the butter hit the vents. Real's overrated, Nolan said. We brought breakfast. They offloaded in silence at first. Purifiers, blankets, crates stamped Relief Fund, property of the people. Then the stoves fired, butter hissed, bread toasted. The smell rolled through corridors like a warm front. Children appeared first, then adults, drawn by the scent, the way ships follow beacons. Celine set up a folding table in the central cavern, asteroid stone overhead, starfield projected on cracked screens. Mira handed out slices on paper plates, solemn as a quartermaster. Nolan flipped bread with the same rhythm he once used on compressors. Steady, sure, alive. A boy with a missing front tooth tugged Nolan's sleeve. My debt was $30,000. Gone. Mom says I can go to school now. He offered a drawing, the Starling trailing soup cans like comet tails, purple dolls riding the bow. Nolan tucked it into his pocket beside a growing stack of similar gifts. Evening cycle dimmed the lights to starglow. Nolan found Celine on the observation blister, Drift 9's slow tumble turning the galaxy into a lazy kaleidoscope. She held 2 mugs, real tea, leaves swirling like miniature storms. Voss sent a packet, she said. Hale's appeal denied. Life on a penal moon. Dargan's running a halfway house on Rusthaven now. Teaches ex-enforcers how to weld instead of threaten. Nolan sipped. Feels distant. Because it is. She leaned against the rail. We're out here. They're back there. Butter travels faster than news. Mira's voice echoed up the ladder. Toast ready and jam. They descended to the galley. The crew had grown. 2 dock workers from Cal 9, a former syndicate accountant turned baker, and a teenage navigator Celine was mentoring. The table stretched long, plates mismatched, laughter easy. Someone had rigged string lights shaped like soup cans. Nolan raised a slice. To the edge, and the people who keep it warm. Glasses clinked, cider, water, tea. Mira's milk sloshed over the rim. No one minded. Later in the quiet between jumps, Nolan stood on the flight deck. The Starling's hull hummed softly, content. He ran a hand along the soup can stripe. Paint worn thin from 100 atmospheres, still proud. Jack 17 drifted beside him, eye dimmed to candle glow. Statistical anomaly, the drone said. 0 debt recidivism in sectors visited. Butter consumption correlates with the Hope Index at 98%. Nolan smiled. You're getting poetic. Side effect of prolonged human exposure. Recommend more toast. Celine joined them, hair loose, barefoot on the cool deck. She slipped her hand into Nolan's. Next stop, the far drift. Uncharted. No fun presents yet. he squeezed. Then we charred it, one slice at a time. Mira patted in, rubbing sleep from her eyes, dolls under one arm. She climbed into the pilot seat, booster long since replaced by a proper chair. When I grow up, I'm going to fly this ship and feed everybody. Nolan ruffled her hair. You'll need a bigger stove. They jumped at local dawn, stars stretching, snapping, reforming. The far drift waited, dark, quiet, full of possibility. Nolan fired the galley burner on a timer. Butter waited in the pan, patient as sunrise. Years later, historians would argue over the exact moment the rim turned. Some pointed to the trial, others to the first disbursement. But the people who lived it knew the truth. It started with a hiss of butter on a dented stove, a mechanic who refused to let hunger win, two sisters with purple dolls and a stubborn hope. The starling kept flying, patched, proud, smelling faintly of cinnamon and engines. Colonies bloomed behind her wake. Lights steady, children laughing, debts forgotten like bad dreams. Nolan's workshop on Rusthaven became a training academy. Celine's nav charts hung in schools. Mira's drawings inspired a generation of pilots. And somewhere, on a quiet night in the far drift, a new camp smelled butter for the first time. A child whispered, "Tastes like peace." The cycle turned. One meal, one open hand, an entire system change. The stove clicked off. The galaxy kept turning. The starling flew on, warm, golden, endless.